I guess I started properly writing poetry when I was about 30 years old. I made a kind of dedication to myself. I'm going to start writing more for just the fun of it, the pleasure of it. And then I think a couple of years into it, I saw a chance to have a free one-to-one. It was advertising Time Out with Ruth Padell at South Bank. And I managed to get myself booked on for that for an hour. And I showed her some of my work, and she said I should try and get my work published. And she suggested how you go about doing that. And the first place she suggested I should go to was the Poetry Library. So I got loads of information from there. And then I just started trying to get poems published in magazines and joined various workshop groups. So I worked with Roddy Lumsden, John Stammers, Pascal Petit, and Stephen Knight, amongst several, to help me develop my skills. And then I guess, when I published enough poems, I submitted to publishers to see if anyone was interested in publishing my work, because I started taking it seriously by then, instead of treating it as a hobby, a thing of fun. I did sort of English at university, BA and MA. I sort of went to university when I was 22, so I was a late starter in life and those sort of things. And those sort of poets have had a big influence on me, the poets from the English tradition. I sort of really liked the music of their poetry, so I'd probably go back to, I think the one that really sort of worked for me was obviously Shakespeare, first of all, because I like the newness of his language, the feeling of newness. And I guess in my poetry I want to create that, because I feel we're in a similar sort of stage with, a kind of cultural mixing, a language mixing, the internet. So I guess he's sort of the ultimate role model. And I was really into Milton. I still sort of read Milton and people like Blake. And then just probably hundreds of poets since then. And I guess, right up to Heaney. And then I read, tons of contemporary poets. So it's, so I'd say influence is kind of impossible to distill into writers, and also just sort of life itself. And so much for me when I started writing was to try and write the stories of the first generation Indians living in Britain and their relationship to the second generation. And I would class myself as second generation. So I wanted to explore that relationship and also see how cultural mixing was taking place in Britain. On the simple level for me, the ambition for that book was to try and brown it up as much as possible. I want to have, if possible, have every poem with an Indian person in it. And I sort of arrived at that at some point in my sort of writing process. I just felt there weren't many Indians in English language poetry. So I want to sort of really, Indian it. Second generation, first generation. So ultimately it's a story really of that first generation coming to Britain and how they've settled in Britain and what their relationship is to their children. That was the basic story for me that I want to capture in that collection. And I guess I want to kind of, create loads of different voices, so allow the characters speak for themselves. So we see the good and bad in all of them, hopefully. So I do, as opposed to a tourist board representation of, aren't Indians really lovely people? Aren't we gorgeous, wonderful? Isn't our food tasty? I want to kind of just, play around with it a bit more, yes. When you see that list of 20, you immediately become aware of the so many good poets who haven't made the list. And then you suddenly feel really lucky, I think. I think it's more luck, because maybe the right judges were there to pick me, I don't know. But very privileged, of course. To be in any shortlist is always an honour, because you always imagine you'd be the one who gets left out in the kind of, the vast micro world of poetry. So yeah, it's a very exciting feeling. I think last decade in particular has been a really exciting period, because more and more diverse poetry is entering the poetry market. I mean, even when I first started out, I guess my first book came out in 2007, I would have said there weren't many Black Asian poets around, certainly of my sort of generation. And now I would say there are loads of Black Asian poets coming through. And women have a voice. Women are sort of, seen in terms of the quality of their work. And they, don't have to be kind of doing really weird things to be acknowledged. And they can just write normal poems about normal life, and I've been given equal status. So I'd say there's a diversity. And also, I think also tying with that diversity is different people from different parts of the country are expressing poetry about their particular region, which makes it much more interesting to me, rather than just having a voice that could be from America or New Zealand or India, but you can really pin down. You can almost hear the accent in some of those poets, and you can localise them, and we can hear the sort of local weather of a place. And I think that makes ultimately Britain a more dynamic, diverse feeling place, and it makes poetry sound much more alive, because you can go from poet to poet and hear something different, a slightly different sound, a different music, a different take on things. So that's taking place. Well, I mean, I'm not here to legislate about the quality. That's for academics and our peers to decide if the work's any good. But I think the breadth's there anyway, in a way that hasn't been in British poetry ever.